Love is cringe. Well, this video is off to a great start. I love romance. There's something so heartwarming and beautiful about seeing two of your favorite characters get together in a show. It makes the build-up of the relationship over the previous 11 episodes feel like a reward. You see these characters go from having weird interactions to them growing closer together as they spend more time with each other, to them eventually realizing their feelings for each other, and this keeps building as the story progresses, eventually leading up to episode 12 or episode 24 if you're an OG weeb. And once you get to that final episode, that moment where the characters finally confess to each other, the show ends.
My disappointment is immeasurable.
Or even worse, fireworks kun.
And my day is ruined.
The show ends without the characters really revealing if they like each other. There probably isn't gonna be a second season, and then you go read the manga only to find out that the manga ends with them confessing to each other and doesn't develop the relationship from there, and that's it. The story doesn't proceed from there. It's over, and I hate this. You see, the biggest problem I've always had with romance in anime and manga isn't the fact that the story ends where I believe it should continue from. It's the fact that the romance genre keeps leading you on. The authors of these stories basically gaslight their audiences by making them believe that something interesting is around the corner. Rent a Girlfriend, My Dress-Up Darling, or even with non-romance series like Witchcraft Works, Food Wars, My Hero, the authors end the stories where they should proceed, and it can leave you feeling unsatisfied. And I'm sure I'm not the only person who feels this way, so join me as I complain for God knows how long this video is and tell you what the biggest problem with romance in anime is.
It's you! You're the one I want!
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
One of the biggest reasons I'm making this video is because of my burning hatred towards the abomination that is known as Rent a Girlfriend. Around 3 years ago, during the early stages of the pandemic, I decided to watch this little known anime by the name of I Can't Get Any Bitches. I mean Rent a Girlfriend. And when I watched the first 11 episodes, I genuinely felt like this story had enough potential to be the face of the romance genre. And then episode 12 happened. And I am not exaggerating when I tell you that this changed me as a person. I started noticing it in other shows that had romance in it. These stories started feeling dragged out. I'd start noticing patterns I didn't notice before. Most of these anime had the same recycled formula you'll find in typical rom-coms. Stop me if you've seen this before. Main character meets a girl. That girl has a unique or quirky trait about them. Main character is a wholesome, sweet guy who just wants to help everyone he can because he loves supporting the people he cares about. The girl begins to realize that she might be in love with him after something happens between the two of them. They grow closer together. The main character feels like he doesn't deserve the girl. The summer festival happens. One, if not both of them, confess their feelings. The show ends. If what I've said sounds like I've described the plot of My Dress-Up Darling, you'd be correct. But I also described the plots of Komi Can't Communicate, Nagatoro, Yamada-kun and the Seven Witches, Quintessential Quintuplets, Kubo Won't Let Me Be Invisible, and so many more. But the thing that really grinds my gears about these stories is how slow the pacing is. You see, 9 times out of 10, whenever you watch a romance anime where the two characters aren't already together at the beginning of the story, then you are in for one of two things. One, you are about to get the most wholesome, cute, and funny romance that will ever be put on TV. Or two, you are about to get the slowest plot progression in the history of mankind. And I get it, not every romance can be a Kaguya-sama. A lot of authors aren't able to capture that same feeling that Akasaka Aka was able to capture when they made Kaguya-sama, where the slow burn relationship is accompanied with insane amounts of humor and an insane amount of chemistry between the two main leads that gives their eventual confession that sweet resolution. And I'm not asking for every romance manga to be Kaguya-sama, but my god, does it get boring having to watch or read hundreds of chapters of two characters who should have gotten together by chapter 50, go back and forth, and the author teasing us by doing the will they, won't they thing that all romance authors do to pad out the story for as long as possible, only to give a very lackluster ending that leaves the reader feeling unsatisfied. Yes, I am still mad. Why? And the reason I'm so frustrated isn't because this dragged out pacing between the characters is mainly a romance anime thing, but it also appears in non-romance anime as well. So this is the part where we talk about shonen. I don't think it would be a hot take for me to say that shonen authors can't write romance in anime to save their lives, especially in the older Shonen Jump titles, Naruto, Dragon Ball, One Piece, and even newer titles like Food Wars, My Hero. And before I get bullied by angry shonen fans telling me that shonen isn't romance, I know. But when authors choose to implant romance or love interest in the story for the main character to have, it doesn't stop them from being criticized because it's a battle shonen. The biggest problem I have when it comes to romance in shonen is how it can remove the urgency that the love interest has because the main character is the most important person of the story. It can make this genuinely interesting character seem like arm candy for the main character, and that removes the sense of importance and actual impact this character has to the plot of the story. And since I brought up Food Wars earlier, let's use that as an example. Food Wars is probably the worst example of a shonen that sets up a love interest from literally the beginning of the story, only for the author themselves to not know how to build a solid foundation for the two main leads. Erina and Soma are two characters that you can tell are going to end up together. Soma's father tells him that in order for him to perfect his cooking, he needs to find someone to devote his cooking to, and that will make him the perfect chef. Anime logic. But the remainder of the story doesn't do this. Food Wars even sets up a mini harem of girls who you would believe are the characters who would eventually compete for being the main love interest, but these relationships don't get explored. They just feel like unnecessary inclusions in an anime about cooking. I watched 5 seasons only to get one of the worst conclusions to a character's relationship that I've ever seen, and I even went to the manga to see if the manga was changed. It wasn't. This is exactly how it ends, and it really ruined the story for me. Erina, Megumi, Meat, all of these characters have really amazing chemistry with Soma, but the author didn't explore those enough, and that's what annoyed me about Food Wars. Food Wars is a story about... Yo, just a quick side note. Do y'all guys know that the creator of Food Wars was a doujin artist? This makes even less sense now. Food Wars is a story about pursuing your passion. It's a story that teaches you that instead of accepting failure, you should learn from those that are better than you so you may become a better artist yourself. But this moment right here of Soma's dad telling him what he needs to do in order to become a better chef feels like an unnecessary addition to a story when it's clear that Soma doesn't take this advice even towards the ending of the final arc of the series, after Soma has spoken to his dad about the conversation he didn't want to listen to. Nothing happens. He doesn't pursue a relationship with Erina, Megumi, or Meat. The show just ends without actually developing their relationships further, and it makes the ending feel drier than a Popeye's biscuit. Food Wars really encapsulates my biggest problem with most romance plotlines in shonen. It feels like the authors don't know how to write a compelling romance between the two main leads of the story. And while most people may find these aspects cringe or unnecessary to the overall premise of the story they like, it really does bother me personally. And this is coming from an isekai harem trash man, but you know what? At least some isekai have the balls to have their characters end up together instead of teasing for 12 goddamn episodes straight. I just find it really difficult to stay invested in these character relationships when it seems like the author themselves doesn't care about their relationships. And it's not even a case of all shonens doing this. Some shonen manage to make these relationships work while not removing the core theme of the story. Fairy Tail is a battle shonen that has aspects of romance between the characters and even has some characters getting together in more solid relationships in the current arc in the manga, but it doesn't change the core theme of the story. Same with One Piece, even though it's an example of a shonen that has almost zero romance in it, but from the many hints of character interactions you can see the chemistry Oda set between these characters. Not Luffy though, he's a man that loves glizzies. Take with that what you will. Even with more newer stories such as Chainsaw Man, Fujimoto has made romance and intimacy one of the more central aspects of the story, which is growing up. As someone who has read the Chainsaw Man manga, both part 1 and part 2, I can tell you that I've never seen a desire for intimacy and a romantic connection as well as it's depicted in Chainsaw Man anywhere else. There's even a really amazing video about the dynamic between Power and Denji by this channel called Beyond Animation, and they do a way better job at explaining how complex the romance between these two characters is. There are shonen series that know how to tackle romance properly, and there are even non-romance stories that do it far better than most romance stories in manga. Berserk is arguably one of the most beautifully written romance stories in all of fiction. What starts as a relationship between two characters who hate each other blossoms into one of the most intimate relationships that has ever been written in the medium of manga. When people mention the importance of Guts and Kasuga's relationship in Berserk, it isn't a minor detail or an aspect of the story that plays no significance from what happens later. Far from it. Guts' entire journey in helping Kasuga restore her mind is the most selfless act of love that I've ever seen in fiction. Guts grows and changes as a person throughout the entirety of Berserk because of his love for Kasuga, and later the love he has for the people he chooses to accept into his life as his new comrades. That's right, Berserk is a shoujo manga and you can't tell me otherwise. I've just gotten really fatigued from romance stories that refuse to develop the relationship between the two main leads, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who wants more in the romance he's given in anime. So how do we fix this? We can't. And you know what? That's fine. You see, despite the amount of complaining I've done in this video, despite how frustrated I may seem, there is still something to enjoy about these types of stories. Character interactions, seeing love bloom for the first time, watching characters deal with their emotions and how they handle romance. These aspects are important to establish because they make you want to invest in these characters. Seeing them interact with the people they love might teach you something about yourself that you didn't know. I complained earlier about My Hero also being a series that has poorly written romance subplots that don't go anywhere. But if you watch the series, you see that Uraraka, Deku's love interest, knows that being with him at this current moment in the story might do more harm than good. So she pushes her own feelings aside and focuses on what's important. Natsu and Lucy from Fairy Tail have one of my favorite relationships in anime, and even though Mashima will do literally anything but confirm that these two like each other, you can see that the romantic aspect of their relationship is there and they do love each other but haven't figured out the way to say it. But you probably don't want to see characters spend hundreds of chapters trying to get together only to be disappointed by an ending chapter that leaves you annoyed. So just do what I do. Find manga and anime where the characters do get together early on. Watch how their relationships progress. There are tons of manga that do have characters who get together halfway through the story or even in the beginning, and watching their relationships develop and grow can be really enjoyable. Komi Can't Communicate is one of my favorite romance manga because the two main leads actually get together halfway through the story. Side note, if you don't believe me when I tell you how much I like this manga, I bought the first 3 volumes of the manga because I genuinely love the characters and the romance in this manga. There's also been a new manga I've read called It's Not Meguru-san's first time and the characters get together literally in the first chapter. And if you aren't a big fan of reading, there are plenty of romance anime that will remind you of how lonely you are, where the main characters usually get together and the anime just follows their relationships for the remainder of the series. Horimiya, Love After World Domination, please watch this show. I'm begging you. It's so wholesome. I love it. Please watch it. Science types fell in love. There are a ton of manga and anime for you to watch and read that will change your views on love and teach you things about yourself that you didn't know before. I didn't cover every aspect of romance in anime. There are a ton of things I could have discussed, from Inuyasha's impact on the genre to the importance of Kaguya-sama, and even surprisingly enough, the importance of Rent-A-Girlfriend and how it's a perfect example of how a manga author manipulates his audience by refusing to end his story. But I digress. The more important thing to focus on is, if you are looking for a specific type of romance, there's always something to fill the void in your cold heart. And before you go find these anime, subscribe to my channel. I make videos sometimes about anime, sometimes about manga. Sometimes I don't post on months on end because I have crippling depression. I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe or I will steal your dog, and I'll see you later.